Grants managers have played a critical role throughout the history of philanthropy, but their jobs will be changing dramatically in the digital age. This is the first known representation of the foundation, and it dates from the 16th century. It is strikingly similar to the Copernican model of the universe, with the sun representing the living donor and the various planets in orbit around him, the lawyer, the accountant, grants administrator, and other members of the family office. Somewhat later in history, philanthropy witnessed the advent of the program officer, who represented the donor to the outside world, while the loyal grants administrators toiled faithfully to make sure due diligence was done, procedures followed, and grants made and reports filed. With the coming of computers in the modern era, grants administrators began to be called grants managers, and in addition to serving program officers, they had a new boss, the personal computer. Now, in this slide of the ideal workstation, my favorite feature is at the very bottom where it says feet on the floor, footrest for shorter people. More recently, starting in the 1990s, foundations began to experiment with the teamwork model, in which grants managers were supposed to participate as co-equals together with program officers and administrative assistants in a team to shepherd the grant through the analysis, approval, and reporting process. It should be noted that this particular photograph of a grant-making team was taken from the perspective of the grantee. And finally, bringing us to the present, the time of the grants manager has finally arrived. Grants managers are ready to take their rightful place atop the world. Why? Why? Because of this, the digital revolution. And I highly recommend the special report issued by The Economist on February 27th, which succinctly and simply explains how dramatic advances in digital technology and computing power are changing everything around us. Why? Because of this. Today, mobile device usage outweighs personal computer use by more than 4 to 1. There are 4.6 billion mobile phone subscriptions worldwide, whereas about 1 to 2 billion people use the internet. Just for reference, world population is about 6.8 billion. So the digital divide is rapidly closing. Why? Because the landscape for social change is being reconfigured. Differing combinations of foundations, governments, businesses, social enterprises, nonprofits, and citizens movements will be required to tackle global warming, persistent poverty, educational achievement, and the problems of tomorrow. And this slide is from an excellent report, which I also recommend, entitled Disrupting Philanthropy by Bernholtz, Skloot, and Varela. If you Google Disrupting Philanthropy, you'll find the link to it easily. Why? Because watchdog groups like the Greenlining Institute are taking publicly available information on foundations and using it to push foundations to do more for issues like racial justice. Or the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy that based its criteria for philanthropy at its best report on foundation center data, ranking foundations according to how much they spend to benefit marginalized populations, how much of their grant money goes for general operating support, and other criteria. And also because the stimulus spending by the federal government is of such an incredible magnitude that it has all of a sudden made the billions in grant dollars spent by foundations every year seem small by comparison. Annual foundation spending is in reality less than 6% of the stimulus spending approved by the federal government. And why? Because online giving platforms are ushering in a new era of citizen philanthropy. Pictured here is global giving, but this could just as well be Kiva, Social Actions, or a host of other sites that allow private individuals to find causes they're interested in anywhere in the world and support them directly online. Who needs a foundation? And why? Because more foundations are beginning to look not just at the 5% of their assets they pay out every year in grants, but the 95% that constitutes their investment portfolio. The toolkit of the future will be a continuum that begins with a grant at one end and a mission-related market rate investment at the other. So what is the state of our field? There are approximately 98,000 grant-making entities in the United States. About 70,000 of these are private foundations, whereas the rest are composed of corporate foundations and giving programs, community foundations, and increasingly grant-making public charities. They manage close to $600 billion in assets, and annually they give out about $46 billion in grants. And we are accustomed to thinking of ourselves as a field of similar entities, foundations, acting in concert to benefit the public good. But maybe we are more like an archipelago. Think Indonesia, a host of endowed islands, not exposed to external market pressures, with our own procedures, our own languages, and our own patterns of evolution. Our archipelago has very big, strategically and technologically sophisticated foundations in it, like the Hewlett Foundation. Yet the vast majority of foundations in the archipelago do not even have websites and 4 or fewer staff members. The chart you're looking at is from original Foundation Center research on more than 11,000 foundations. And it indeed tells us that only 29% of these foundations reported having a website, issuing publications, or annual reports. And a full 76% of them had 4 or fewer staff members. The primary source of information in an archipelago remains the 990PF tax return form. Now, this is a poor image, but I'm using it for a reason. This particular 990 return is filled out in pen. Now, it could be worse. Every year at the Foundation Center, we see tax returns filled out in pencil. And extracting data from these, cleaning it, standardizing it, and getting it into a database is truly a labor of love. Which leads many to believe that those who work at the Foundation Center are akin to monks in the medieval scriptorium, patiently transcribing information from these tax returns and manually keying it into databases. So, will philanthropy join the digital revolution or not? The answer, is it yes? Is it maybe? Is it no? Well, we would clearly like it to be yes. But if philanthropy is to fully embrace the digital world, it will have to fundamentally rethink the way it does business. Much of philanthropy has already moved beyond the notion of simply giving away money to a more strategic approach of social investment. But social investment is increasingly accompanied by online application and reporting forums, theories of change, outcome measurement and evaluation, all of which generate a tremendous amount of information, data, that could be extremely valuable. And after responding recently to the 4th wave of questions generated by one of these online application systems in use by a foundation, I began to wonder, could it be that this foundation really has the capacity to use all this digitized information we were patiently providing? Managing information to improve social investment strategies and to produce and share knowledge is the major challenge of foundations today. And grants managers are at the center of that challenge. Any foundation that is not able to make the connection between grants management, IT, knowledge management, and communications will fall far short of its potential in the digital age.